Good afternoon, everyone. Country Flyboy here, and today I'm making a short video to showcase a mod for the Captain Sim 757. Me and another person by the name of Sean Zarella, I really hope I pronounced that correctly, have been working on a mod for the 757. Now, for those of you who fly the Captain Sim 757 know you have to run a program that came with it called ACE if you wanted to change the payload. You were limited to 172 passengers because Captain Sim modeled every single seat in the 757 as part of their payload dialog. This means you have a really accurate payload model. However, it is problematic if you want to do multiple flights with different payloads, because the process for doing 2 flights in one day with the Captain Sim 757 default normally was do the first flight, switch to a default aircraft, run ACE to change the payload of the 757, then switch back to the 757. And then you had to reset all the aircraft systems because they weren't how you left them. Well, we've changed that. We've simplified the payload so that you can use the default FSX payload dialog to change the payload as you see fit. Now, as we've set it up here, we've set it up for a aircraft with an operational empty weight of 132,500 pounds, which for those of you who use simbreif, that is the operational empty weight that simbreif uses for the 757-200. We've defined some stations so that you can change the weight in them, and we've set it for a full cabin of 184 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. Now, the 757, the payload we modeled is 184 passengers, but you can seat up to 3 pilots and 5 flight attendants. So I've included this Excel spreadsheet that I made. This is what I used to help me work on this mod, and I'm going to include it to help you calculate the weights. Alright, so first, what we have here is the 757 working tab. This is where most of the stuff is done. This is where you enter in most of the data you need. I'm going to make a quick comment. Any cells you see with a cell comment, like this one right here, those are cells that require data to be entered. Although not all cells with the comments require data for the flight planning, those are cells that do have to have data in them, even if that's just blank. For instance, the freight and mail over here is optional. You do not have to enter anything there. Down here you will see you specify the number of passengers you want in a particular rows. Say like you want first class, we can fit 26 passengers. The comments pop up, tell you what you put there and how much you can. So let's say we want, I don't know, 20 passengers in first class cabin. It then calculates the weight and adds it together. I've included some macros up here to get to some fast payload calculation. Full cabin, half of that in an empty cabin. I also want to note that these red text here and here will give you messages in case you do something wrong. See, like, economy comfort has a maximum of 26 passengers. If I were to put 30 in there, see the text here changed. It'll say passenger count exceeds capacity, and that's for the economy comfort class. And it also works over here. Over here you see a chart telling you what your weights you need to worry about are. This Excel spreadsheet is designed for flight planning. In particular, me personally, I like to do all my flight planning before I start the simulator. That way, I don't have to worry with other programs, have to connect to the simulator to get data and all other sorts of bullcrap. I can just run the sim and be done. So, this chart, now, I use simbreif for my flight planning. Any good flight planner will let you change the weight of the payload or something. Simbreif lets you enter your own zero fuel weight, which is what I recommend doing. So, over here, this is the weights you'll have. You'll have your operational empty weight. If you use FS build, there's the payload there if you need to enter that, or if your flight planner wants the payload instead of zero fuel weight. And we also have the zero fuel weight. Next to these, you'll see the maximums and a second message. See, we can have 75.5 on fuel, so if I put a really ridiculous number, you'll see fuel weight is over max, gross weight is over max. If I entered something for the example flight today, I did a quick flight plan on simbrief that calls for 18,697 in fuel. There we go. Now, it's important to note that this mod was designed with simbrief in mind. It calculates the weights the exact same way simbrief does, so anything you put in here should match simbrief, assuming you entered the data into simbrief correctly. What I like to do when flight planning is run this first to get the zero fuel weight, then run simbrief to get the flight plan, enter in the fuel and whatnot. So let's see, here we have, we'll put in about 500 pounds of freight and 500 pounds of mail. So everything here is pretty much done. Note you can change the flight crew count to 3 or 5 flight attendants if you want. It is not necessary. Oops. It is not necessary, but you can do that. Default, it will have 4 flight attendants, which gives you the accurate operational empty weight. Moving right along to the next tab. This is the load instructions tab, and this is probably the most important one. This is what you would enter in the simulator. So here we have the data presented in a similar way that the Flight Sim default payload dialog presents it. The station names are the same, and I've drawn arrows to show you the approximate location on the aircraft that the station is. So basically, when you launch Flight Sim and you want to change the payload, you open up the default payload dialog, and then you would look at this sheet to see what the weight is you would enter. Best example, since the mod is already, if you use a full cabin, most of these numbers will be the same as what's already in there by default, except for the cargo. That's usually different if you enter something here. Now if we go to half cabin, the numbers are all different, so now you would have to change them in the sim. As the deviations here, you can pretty much type anything you want. I've made up a name to put down here. This is the load instruction sheet that is normally handed to the pilots sometime before departure. I think it's like right before pushback. And it's just like a final check to make sure everything is correct on it. And again, this mod was, or this Excel spreadsheet was designed for flight planning before starting Flight Sim. So you could get a look at this, and if you see this chart here, this will calculate the weights exactly the way Flight Sim does, not the way simbrief does. So you can see what the weights in Flight Sim will be before you even start Flight Simulator. They should match up within plus or minus 1,000 pounds of this. Next tab. This next tab I think everyone is going to really like. This is a load sheet. Now, in real life, load sheets specify the weight and balance of the aircraft, and they're usually given to the flight crew sometime before departure, right around boarding, about 10 minutes to go, last call, somewhere around there. Load sheets in real life, their layout and shape vary from company to company and even aircraft to aircraft. I've modeled this one off nothing in particular, but I've included all the weight, all the information I think you would find useful. And again, cells with cell comments like these here will require you to enter data in order for the sheet to be complete. I got 3 cells entered here already. But let's put our departure and destination. We're departing Atlanta for Jacksonville. We're flight 8502. Note that is also carried over to down here. Next, we would have to enter our fuel. For all the weights are calculated, so all we have to enter now is a taxi out fuel. I'll just put 3,000 pounds, and a trip fuel. I'll just put 10,000 pounds. Those aren't actual burns, but that's what I just put in a random number in there. So now the load sheet is for the most part complete, and it has a lot of useful data on it. If we start from the top, you see the general flight data, date and time, aircraft information. The next is the loading info. We'll see the loading compartments, which is the cargo bays. We see how much of, you see the total cargo weight in the Cargo bays is 5,600, which is really light. Again, we used the half crew, or the half cabin count thing, so only 92 passengers, so pretty light in the cargo bays. And then you see it divided here between bags, cargo, and mail. Below that is the count in each passenger cabin. See, we have 92 passengers total, which is 13 in the first class, 13 in economy comfort, and 66 in economy. Below that is the configuration for the aircraft. This is important if you, the end user of the mod, have decided to change the overall configuration of the plane. There will be information to get you started on doing that in the Readme of it, but it's modeled after the Delta Airlines 75X cabin configuration, which is 184 passengers. So this here will show you the maximum number of passengers you can have, as well as the maximum number in each class. First, economy, comfort, and economy. So we can have 26 first class, 26 economy comfort, and 132 economy. Below that is the weight, the actual weight of each class. So we have 92 passengers total, meaning our passenger weight is 16,100 pounds. And here's how that's divided amongst the classes. Below that is the weight information you need to know. Operational empty weight, total traffic load, zero fuel weight. Block fuel, which you enter in on this tab, and it's carried over here. Then you have the ramp weight. Now, you have the maximums listed here. There's no cells that will check them for you. You have to check them yourself. Then you see me enter the taxi out fuel, which will calculate the takeoff weight, and the trip fuel, which will calculate a landing weight. Below that is rem fuel, which means remaining fuel, which is how much fuel it expects you to have on landing after you've exited the runway. It should be around that number. That's just a note of how much fuel you have to play around with. So, useful to know there. I should note that landing and takeoff weights are estimates. Once you get flying, they could be very different. Now, the underload is the difference between, in real life, it's the difference between total traffic load and maximum traffic load. So, how far away from maximum are you? I couldn't find a total traffic load max for the 757, so I just used zero fuel weight. This underload is the difference between maximum zero fuel weight and the actual zero fuel weight that you have. So you have another 29,800 pounds that you could throw onto the plane before you have to start putting fuel. Again, max zero fuel weight is the maximum weight you can put on the plane that's not fuel. Anything after that has to be fuel. So that's... we'll cover the last minute change section last. Balance and trim conditions. This is the CG and load index for the various weights. I've entered the... Now these are accurate. I have done several tests and they are within 1%, plus or minus 1% of the actual CG of the aircraft in the sim. Each and every time. So I can print it. These are accurate right here. So you feel free to take these numbers and enter them in the FMS. The CGs are given in % Mac and for various weights. Here we got zero fuel weight, ramp weight, takeoff weight, and landing weight. When you put in the info in the FMS, you would use the takeoff weight CG. And you would want to take note of the other ones to make sure that they're not out of whack with the maximum CG. You would check that against your charts. Load index at zero fuel weight is just the inches aft of the datum that the CG is. Or I think that's feet, actually. Yeah, that's feet after the datum that the CG is at. Not really too useful, really. It's there if you want it. The captain's note information is information that the dispatcher and whoever did the load sheet would want to convey. You see here, you'll list your taxi time, which 3,000 pounds is about half an hour worth of taxi fuel. Standard, and then it has a notation, standard weights used, and then it has those weights below it. Passengers, 175, and baggage, 55. Actually, it's supposed to be 50. I need to change that. But, basically, to get the weight of a passenger, you take the total passengers you have and multiply them by the standard weights here. And then there's this cell here will let you put in whatever you want. You could list what the cargo is, any special cargo, like maybe you're carrying a casket, human remains, something like that. You know, that happens. They carry that an awful lot in real life. Below that is the dispatcher name and the dispatcher's ID number. You can put in any name and any random number here you want. And below that is the phrase end load sheet, flight number, departure airport, destination airport. Now, the last minute change section. In real life, the weight of the aircraft could change at any time. Obviously, we don't know how many passengers we're going to have until the plane is boarded and the door closed. So, we do our best guess to determine how many passengers we have. Now, the overall, the way they do that in real life is complicated. Sort of, they see how many passengers have checked in, so they just use that number, I believe. But, all the passengers that checked in when they arrived may not actually get on the plane. They might have got lost in the airport, they got drunk and couldn't board, stuck at the restaurant, stuck at the bar, or they just turned around and went home. Either way, they're not on the plane, but they are listed in the calculated loads. So if you have a program, like I do, that I think it's called Passenger Simulator, that will have a random chance of passengers being late or not arriving at the gate at all, then you would want to use the last minute change section. Now, nothing is listed here because this is for after the load sheet has been printed out and handed to the pilots. That is when the loads are finalized. However, if something changes, if passengers never showed up and we had to take their bags off, or maybe we have extra fuel aboard or something, we would write that in the last minute change section. Getting a little thirsty, sorry. So, I've never really used it. It's there for you if you want it. I'm not really sure how to fill it out because I've never really had to. So yeah, that's there. For those of you who have that, who like to do these load sheets, you're going to find this very interesting. I've included the last minute change, CG calculations, and all that. And that is basically it. I just wanted to showcase this because at time of recording this, the Payload mod is not available yet. I am busy typing up the Readme for it. But rest assured, I should have it up within a few weeks of this video going up. If it's not, then I most likely got shot and either in the hospital or dead. So, do enjoy the mod when it is released, and happy tailwinds.